When talking about evolution, scientists use what's called a phylogenetic tree. This is a way to show how long ago certain species lived and how closely related each species are. The branch points on the tree are important because they show us when the last common ancestor was for two related species. In this video, Dr. Mike Whiting, an evolutionary scientist and museum director at Brigham Young University, explains the hominid phylogenetic tree, which describes all the hominin species we have found so far and how long ago they lived. The phylogenetic tree in this video is oriented from left to right, meaning that the further to the right, the more recent the species existed, all the way up until our own species, Homo sapiens.
All right, so what we have here displayed is a phylogeny representing what is currently the best understood set of relationships among hominins. And as we spoke about earlier, there's a huge diversity of hominin forms which have been found. The earliest one dates back to Sahelanthropus chadensis. It's given the name of Tomai. And this is a real amazing sort of fossil because it's found somewhere between 6 and 7 million years ago. Now, what we know from the DNA evidence is that about 6 or 7 million years ago is where we have dated the divergence of the chimp lineage from the hominin lineage. And so what we're looking at is perhaps what the common ancestor of chimps and humans looked like. And it has got an elongated face, the skull extends back, the cranium has not been enlarged. And then when we move to about 6 million years, we have some telltale fragments from a group known as Auroran tugensis. Now, all that we have from this fossil is a portion of the femur, and this femur gives us some indication that this was perhaps adapted partially for bipedality. And then we're going to move to this one here. This is Ardipithecus ramidus, and Ardipithecus ramidus was an amazing discovery because number one, it is very old. It's at 4.4 million years ago. Number two, we have found even more than the skull. We have fragments of the hands, fragments of feet, and fragments of the pelvis. And what we learn from this fossil is we have an organism which has the ability to be bipedal, but also to be very effective and very efficient in the trees. It's got long toes, it's got long fingers, it had the ability to grasp, but the shape of the pelvis also showed that it had the ability to be bipedal. And this fossil was found at a time where within Africa there was a large expanse of rainforest, so this was really well adapted at living within those sorts of conditions. Okay, so that's Ardipithecus ramidus. And then we're going to move to a group known as the Australopithecines. So the Australopithecines are some of the early hominins, which include a variety of species. Here we have Australopithecus afarensis, and I refer to this as Lucy's family. So here in the middle we have Lucy. This is a reconstruction of Lucy as she was found. A few years later, as they went back to the same site, they found more and more fossils representing this species, including the male right here and a juvenile which was just recently found, just in the last few years. So you'll notice that with the male and female, we have something we refer to as sexual dimorphism, right? The females are down here low like this. The males were much larger. And in fact, with this species where we have found it, we have also found a set of footprints where these were walking side by side, indicating the bipedality. And with our little baby Lucy right here, baby Lucy is incredible because she's 97% complete. And you just don't ever find that with skulls. Just a remarkable sort of find. So this is Lucy and Lucy's family. Now, afarensis is not the only species of the Australopithecines. We also have this group here called Africanus. And Africanus includes this small one over here you can see to the right. And that's called the tongue child. And this was the very first hominin fossil that was found within Africa. And what we see within Africanus is some similar features to afarensis, although the cranium is a little bit larger and the brow ridge has been reduced slightly. So from Australopithecus africanus, we have an interesting set of species which emerge. One group is called Paranthropus, and you can see Paranthropus down here with these three bottom skulls. Now, Paranthropus was a group. It's what we refer to as a monophyletic group or a natural group. And these were organisms which had developed very large jaws and brow ridges. These guys were the amazing eaters. They're referred to as the black skull here. This is Paranthropus ethiopicus, and the skull is black because of magnesium deposits that were found with the bone. You have Paranthropus boisei here, and then finally we've got Paranthropus robustus, which lived at about 1 million years ago. Now these guys, what we know is, by taking a look at the teeth and looking at the wear patterns on the teeth, it's quite clear that these guys fed on tubers. They fed primarily on plant material. They probably were scavengers, but Paranthropus as a group went extinct. They just couldn't survive. And there's a lot of interesting theories why they may not have made it. Okay? And so next to the Paranthropus then, we have a combination of Australopithecines, including the species Sediba, which has a combination of Australopithecine and Homo characters. And then we finally get into these groups that we start thinking of as we're coming closer to our own species, and that's the genus Homo. And this includes Homo habilis. Homo habilis was called the handyman. It lived about 2 million years ago, and it's the first fossil where we have found tools associated with it. Now there is some debate as to whether these tools came from the Paranthropus, the nutcracker man, or whether they came from Homo habilis because they were found in the same areas. But it's clear that with habilis, we see the development of the technology to produce these tools. And these are referred to as Oldowan tools, as you can probably not even see. Okay, you might be able to see right here, right now. Very simple sorts of tools, but we know these are not just rocks, right? So sometimes people will take a look at these stones and they'll say, oh, yeah, I can go out and I can find a stone and I can pick it up and pretend it's a tool. Well, there's a certain kind of fracture pattern within the rocks which can only be made by striking them in very precise angles. And these are the telltale signs that these were deliberately manufactured. So we've got Homo habilis, we've got a variety of other Homo species, until we get to this one, Homo ergaster, which lived in Africa, and then finally Homo erectus, which left Africa. With Homo ergaster and Homo erectus, we see a major change in the postcranial elements, in the parts which are not the skull. And what we recognized in this lineage is this is the point at which hominins began to run, began to become efficient persistence runners, meaning they were endurance runners. And there's a whole variety of features associated with the pelvis, with the legs. The arms become shorter. We see new attachments for muscles on the back of the cranium and other features which suggest that actually running became one of the major drivers of hominin evolution. From ergaster, things get complicated. We have a variety of species. Heidelbergensis right here, Naledi right here, Floresiensis. Floresiensis was the hobbit. It was found on a small island in Indonesia, the island of Flores. We recognize that even though these things were the size of Lucy, they had skulls very similar to Homo sapiens. Homo naledi, you should know something about. This was the amazing discovery found recently in a cave in Africa, and we continue to find new and exciting discoveries with this species. The Denisovans are known only from DNA, which was extracted from a tooth and a couple finger bones. The DNA tells us that this is a species close to Homo sapiens and yet different. And then finally, we get to Homo sapiens. And this is a reconstruction of an individual at about 300,000 years ago, which is the earliest that Homo sapiens dates back. And one of the key features of Homo sapiens is that we have a pronounced chin, where the other hominins do not. So this is the quick overview of the evidence. And what you need to recognize is behind each one of these reconstructions, you've got 10 bones, or 100 bones, or 1,000 bones, which have been discovered, and that information has been synthesized to have this incredible view of former biodiversity.